Oh, yeah, that's right. I got one more. I'm really happy we have the small ones. I'm really happy we have the small ones. Yeah.
Record.
Yeah. Like.
Alright. So I'll show you it all right now. But say I want to have you do it on Thursday or whatever. Basically on base minutes. And then
Yeah.
I'm Jessica.
Yeah.
Do you have a name?
Ready to go? Okay, we're good.
Okay, we're good. Melissa, can you unmute?
Yes, hi, I'm
Awesome.
here. Thank
Thank
you,
you, perfect.
Mayor,
Okay.
or Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, so here we go. So I'd like to call the City Council study session to order. It is May 2nd at 2:17 PM. We're going to go around and just introduce ourselves as to who's here. So Jessica Buell, Mayor Pro Tem. You have to push that.
Already made my first mistake. Mark Morgan, City Attorney.
Olivier Bosman, City Councilor.
Aaron Hyder, Assistant City Manager.
Jose Madrigal, City Manager.
David Woodruff, City Councilor.
Gilda Yasi, City Council.
And then Melissa,
Yeah.
do you want to? Okay.
Yeah, Melissa Youssef, Mayor, City Council.
Excellent. So before we get started, I would like to welcome our new city attorney, Mark Morgan. Mr. Morgan has a ton of public meeting experience, so don't be surprised if he interjects and jumps in to help us run more effective and efficient meetings. Welcome, Mark. Yep. Okay, so let's get started with the first item on the agenda, future new business and review of agendas. Did everyone have a chance to look and review the agendas that were sent out? Any questions or comments on those to start? Looks good. Okay. Now on to future new business. Do any
Mayor,
oh,
I'm sorry. Are we still on new business?
I'm
Mayor.
I was just announcing future new business right now.
Oh, okay. I'll let you go on that.
No, you're
first.
good. Now on
Sorry
to
to
yeah,
interrupt.
future new business. Do any counselors have any future new business topics to bring up?
I do if no one else does, but if someone else does, they can sure go first.
You're on. Go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, I wanted to ask council if they would consider having our discussion on liaison positions. And on May 16th, when I'm live and present for that discussion, I would sure prefer it. I think it's really important assignments and I'd love to be there in person if council would consider waiting for this topic.
Does anyone on council have opposition to that or in favor?
I'm supportive of it.
And I'm supportive of it too. So it looks like we have unanimous support for that.
Great.
Mayor?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, council. Thank you for that. I apologize that I'm virtual. I hate being virtual for this meeting. So thank you a lot for that. The second one is I wanted to just talk about the office hours setup schedule that I've sent out. I really appreciate council considering taking those office hours. If there's any questions on that, I'd love to answer those now. And if there's council support, I'll continue to work with the remaining councilors to get them signed up if they're so interested.
I support.
Yeah,
Great.
I think it's a great idea, Melissa. I just had
Okay.
a question because you were sending the email out with the request not to respond. So
Right.
Do you want that to go through staff or do you want everybody to send it to you? Because that might be,
Right. I was trying to avoid a serial meetings. Thank you, Olivier, for that. Yeah, you could go ahead. Why don't you go ahead? But I do appreciate everyone being so proactive. It's awesome. We've got a really good team here who wants to work with our community and get office hours in place. So it's really awesome at the same time. But it would be great, Olivier, if you want to fill it out and send it to, perhaps if Jose would allow us to send it to Kyle.
But if I'm not mistaken, I think we can do scheduling of meetings and times on one email. That is not a serial meeting. It's only when we're talking about topics and like discussion. items. We can do
Ve-
scheduling
Very
in
good
a group
point,
email. Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem. Mark, do you agree with that?
I do.
Okay, good. All right. Well, then that makes it easy. So Olivier, you can go ahead and respond directly on that. And Gilda, if you'd like to do the same, that would be wonderful. I think it's exciting that we have this opportunity to set these in place, and it seems like there's council support for it. I think the community will really like to be able to outreach with council in this regard. So I'm looking forward to getting this in place right away.
I agree. And just for the record, for Counselors Yazzie and Bosman, my schedule is pretty flexible. So if there's an open week that doesn't work for you, that you need my week, I'm happy to like switch. I just filled it out to fill it out. So
I've
I'm
already my schedule before I can commit, but I'm sure for doing the office hours. Okay, so did I hear that we can go ahead and schedule meetings by group email without falling out of favor with the open records law?
That's correct. You're allowed to schedule without violating open records or sunshine laws. Just make sure that when you do it, you don't start discussing the merits of anything. Keep it strictly to scheduling.
Wonderful. That's helpful. Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate council support for this, and we'll keep moving forward. And once I get all of the, once Gilda, you have had a chance to look at your schedule, and same with you, Olivier, and if there's needed changes, we'll make changes. And then I'll try to get these submitted right away to staff so that we can get it on our Durango Gov website, hopefully in a really open and transparent way, so we can get the word out there. And if you have any ideas on getting the word out for council office hours, I'm sure we're all ears.
Mayor Pro Tem, just a quick administrative question. Staff's all prepared with an implementation and a communication plan to launch these once the schedule is finalized. One
Okay.
quick question we have, do you prefer, there was conversation around, sign up in advance? We can build that into that, or do you prefer it just to be open and you're there? Does council want to have like advanced registration so you know that folks are coming or who?
I prefer it to be organic personally. I'd hate to schedule a bunch of stuff and then not be able to get to somebody even though they had a scheduled time because something ran over, but it'd allow us to people that we didn't maybe get to that we could reschedule with them one-on-one.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Organics worked well in the past. People can just come when it works. They know we're there for an hour and a half. If they come at the end, they come at the end. It just doesn't matter.
I feel if it's not working, we can adjust, as if for some reason it's like, whoa, this isn't working for some reason, we'll adjust and shift. But for right now, I'm open to what Dave said.
Great, thank you.
Okay, other counselors for new business, future new business.
Yeah, I had two Mayor Pro Tem. I have to get used to that. There's two items. The first one I wanted to see if there's council support for is to look into bike and pedestrian connections to downtown. And I'm thinking of two opportunities. One, and I'll explain a little bit exactly, not a little bit, I'll explain exactly which sections that would be. One is the Air and River Trail connection coming from the south, where Santa Rita Park is, right before the bike trail goes over the river and underneath the bridge, to see if it's possible to continue on the east side of the highway to Santa Rita Drive, and then connect to the existing trail, which is at that traffic light that goes up downtown, which would, it's only 300 yards or so. It would simplify, especially with the growth in Three Springs and Home Depot. There's a lot of housing being added and will be added. It will create a very straight path to the downtown area. So you don't have to, go around Santa Rita and the DoubleTree and crossing Highway 550 again. It's CDOT property, and I'm sure there's always obstacles, but hopefully that would be one very easy pathway to connect the whole south in a straight line to downtown. Did everybody get that little section? Okay, good. And the second connection would be to connect the northern part of the city to downtown, which is where Rotary Park and Adams Brewing Company is. And then basically following the train track to the intersection of Highway 550, East 14th Street and Main Street, where the traffic light is. So you would be at the north part of Main Street into downtown. And that's only about 150-yard section. And it would allow all those people to go straight into downtown in a relatively safe manner. And you would use one crossing by using the existing traffic light system near the powerhouse. And the reason I bring this one up, because it's an opportunity now, because I'm not sure if you're familiar, the Comcast Spectrum building, that's right on the corner there. It's, I think it's either vacant or partially used, as well as the property across the train tracks, which is Basin Printing, which has changed and is going through changes. And on each side of the train track, there's only 2 or 3 property owners. The distance from the river, from the train tracks to the buildings is about 20 feet, similar as other sections of the Animas River Trail. And over a year ago, I'd spoken to Mr. Harper of the railroad to see if anybody ever reached out to him in time to make that
I'm going to
connection.
apologize for interrupting you, but it's my job to represent you. And my understanding of Robert's rules, you're getting kind of far away from just
Okay.
introducing something and discussing it too much.
Okay,
These are things that are much better left for a meeting that's been announced and everyone has a chance to respond to.
yeah, basically, this is the section that so those 2 sections of the Animas River Trail connection to downtown. And I wanted to see if there's council support to direct staff to thoroughly look into those, both of those connections, what obstacles may be, come up with solutions, and how we can make it work.
So just for new council, a little like overview for when we talk about future new business, high level and like ideas. And then we don't really get into talking about the subject specifically, but if there's support to talk about it, we can put it on an agenda for the future. The next study session is effective network and infrastructure, correct?
Yes.
If there's council support, which we can go, would it make sense? Okay, so yeah, I don't want to get into the details, but would it make sense to maybe talk about that downtown connection, background ideas during, I know it's full right now. I didn't know if there was if council's willing to go 15 minutes extra and maybe take away the break, if that's okay with you.
It sounds like a good idea to talk about it at that time, Mayor Pro Tem.
I support talking about the connectivity to downtown. It's been, we've had the downtown underpass and just like where it's at and, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I support that.
I do too. I support it as well. Thanks for bringing it up, Olivier.
Agreed, I support it.
So just to make sure I got clarity, study session on the 16th and add it on top of the items that we have.
Unless there's something that you think potentially could be moved and we're willing to go an extra 15 over and take away the 10-minute break.
So that's fine with me. I
Is that
just kind of want to
okay?
make sure that I'm under the understanding of council and the desire for the council of where they would like to place it. We can put it on for another 15 minutes, would end at 4:50 if we took away the 10-minute break.
Yeah, and then maybe Tony is so efficient and effective.
Yeah, I was gonna
Guy.
say, does Tony need a full hour?
So-
He's usually pretty concise.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's pretty concise. I think
This is
this
a big
one is
topic, though.
going to be a new topic with
Yeah.
funding requests and how does the council want to go about it and
It is a
getting
big topic.
direction. So it is going to be a pretty big topic on it. But again, if anyone does finish sooner, then it definitely helps to be able to fit that in. So we can place that in and look to see where we can go. And I think that from a staff perspective, we would be able to provide an overview of where we are at. I'm not sure we'd be able to provide any much more detail than
Maybe
solutions or problems, but an overview of both sites and just kind of see where we can get into.
maybe an overview, and then if the council wants more, we can do that in the future later. But it might be good to get Councillor Bosman's ideas beforehand and work with some
Sure.
and just thoughts, and so we can kind of have it concise.
If you'd like to
If
send
that's
them, I'd be
Yes.
happy to.
Yeah, if there's any way to kind of sketch up any type of map prior to that initial discussion, it would be helpful for me because I'm trying to make sure I understand what Councillor Bosman's is saying, but I actually don't think I totally do. So I'd love to make sure I get it for that discussion.
I will, I'll be happy to send a little drawing of the southern section and the northern section to council. Don't respond, obviously, because there'll be discussion and staff. And then, yeah. Okay, very good. Well, thank
Okay.
you for that support. The next one, I think, yeah, is the fire station location in downtown. And I'm going to follow your advice. I will not go into too much detail, but how do I word this best? I wrote down a couple of comments here, but there's discussion going on about 9R building, the fire station, River City Hall. And I really feel that we need to have involvement of the community at an earlier stage than working through all the details in executive sessions and behind, well, I don't like to say behind closed doors, but invisible and untransparent to our community. Because we started off with the combined fire station, police department at River City Hall, first at the 9R building, then at River City Hall. And then it switched to those options going separate, looking at the fire station and then looking at city services and police department. And I think at the council, I'm asking if there's council support to have that in a more public, community engaged session, so we can have how do I say it? So we can have, so we can decide, or we can provide direction of what we, as on behalf of the community, want to steer in the bigger picture and the bigger vision of our downtown. I'm not sure if I said that.
So I think I'm getting I'm just going to jump in real quick. With the MOU that we have, which the previous council decided that was the direction we were going to go. I personally feel like that's, it would be disrespectful is not the word, like not a good partnership in that MOU if we did this as well. 1, 2, I'd like to get through the executive session. And then if that we're having today during the regular city council meeting, and if after that we determine something else, then that's fine. But I'm not willing to support that yet. I think with the public, what was that called? Public outreach we did with the Civic Center, that we got that great feedback. Like, I think we've done some good community outreach. Was it far enough in advance or perfect? No. But I feel like we're headed in the right track. And so I'm not going to support this yet, but potentially in the future.
I kind of agree. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I think I'd rather have a more robust conversation around some of these other aspects. And then I think we could have a better discussion around public input and getting full public purview of what they want to see out of the downtown cityscape.
I do believe in community engagement, and I think it's a good thought. But at this point, being new to the council, and we do have an executive session later on this topic, I think we could revisit this a little bit later, but I do think community engagement with making these large decisions, keeping them informed, a good path to follow.
Can I ask a couple questions just for clarity, since I'm new? We're talking about a specific piece of property, 9R.
So I think Councillor Bosman's is wanting more of the vision of downtown with a lot of these properties,
Okay.
which we're talking about a few of them this afternoon.
Right. I saw that there's something that, my question is, has the council taken any prior action relative to the property that Councillor Bozeman is mentioning?
Yes,
So there's been prior action taken, and that's what's going to be discussed at the executive session tonight?
yes.
Okay.
Well, it depends on which property there's.
Well, one of the properties at least. Yes.
I heard
But-
9R. I knew that was on the executive session. I'm just trying to be cautious with you guys because you don't know all of the history yet.
Sure.
But you can't go back and undo something that was done by the prior council, especially if there's not support with the council to do that. I don't believe that you're being secretive if you're going to discuss prior council action that you now need to negotiate in executive session, which is what I understood was happening when I walked into this meeting. If that's not the case, or I have a misunderstanding, I'll advise you differently. But at this point, it seems like the council's taken action. action led to some executive sessions to negotiate about a property. And as long as you're not asking to revisit all of that, if you just want a bigger picture, that's what I'm trying to understand, what exactly you're asking for.
I think my concern why I bring this up, and let me also put in perspective, there's 3 councillors that do not support it, which is fine. I think after the executive session, we have a public session, we can always say, let's bring this out to the community. The concern I have is that we are discussing individual projects and uses, and we're moving forward with negotiations and etc. But we've never had a thorough, bigger picture discussion on how that fits in our city, in our downtown, in our community with different needs and opportunities, like at the train parking lot.
I would
That's
suggest
right.
maybe that's something that you could do after you figure out what happens in the executive session.
Yeah, and
Because
that,
until you've negotiated, you don't really know what the plan is, but I
well,
don't want to overstep. I'm just trying to understand.
well,
I
and
do
I appreciate
understand.
it, appreciate it. And I think that's where the cart before the horse, your comment, I feel that we are putting the cart in front of the horse by going so far into negotiations without having had that
Okay.
discussion of where we want to go. With that said, I appreciate it.
Awesome. Perfect. Any other new business?
I do have one item that I just want to get new business on in regards to our city council retreat and just grab some clarity in regards to the expectations of the council. Moving from the discussion that we had or that the mayor had mentioned at the last council retreat was to have a council retreat with the new councilors to talk a little bit about how the council can best work together and run meetings efficiently. Then I believe Councilor Bosmans, you had some other ideas that you would like to see maybe placed on that agenda. So I'm kind of at a standstill with being able to schedule that retreat until I get a clarity from the consensus of the council of what that retreat was meant to be and what items are supposed to be placed on it. So I'd like to get clarification of, are there going to be additional items placed on other than those? And do those still have the consensus of the council? Because at this point, that's what I have for the council. Those 2 items, which I think will probably take 3 to 4 hours in a half-day retreat. If anything else wants to be added, we can move with that, but just want to make sure what those items are and if the council has a desire to do so.
If I may respond to that. I really feel that with the new councils on board, that the dynamics of the city council will change quite a bit. And I also am confident, well, I'm confident it will change, and I think it would be beneficial for the new councillors to get a bit used to how this works. Probably takes you a bit of a moment. I mean, it took me a while to get used to council meetings, so that you have better feedback to give during a retreat on what you'd like to see as changes or improvements or whatever we can do to make city council events work better. So that is the first one I think that I want to share, just to buy some time and have some more thought about.
I thought when we came on as new city councilors and we did the personality testing and how you work best with each other and really get to know each other. But then just from being on council, in my mind, we don't have like a toolbox of like in front of us of like how to run efficient and effective meetings. And I know sitting here today, this is the first meeting I've ever run. I had like a ton of anxiety and like met with everybody just to like make sure that I was like, okay, because I don't know, I didn't grow up in like speech and debate and knowing like how long everyone should talk and what my tools are for, making sure that we are respectful and, responsible to each other and our, mission, vision, values and stuff like that. With everything we have going on, especially as you guys get into this, I don't have more than a half day extra meeting to like add in. And for me, that would be the most beneficial. How do we work best together? Who we are, how can we be effective and efficient? And how do we have a toolbox of things to utilize to hold ourselves accountable and each other accountable? And I think that with just past issues that we've run into as not this council, but other councilors, I just feel like it would be great. So that's my opinion.
I was just going to chime in and suggest I agree with both Councillor Bosmans and Buell. I actually think that, I think I see this retreat as an opportunity to get together with this new council team. Like Councillor Buell is saying, learn about each other, talk about how we might best work most respectfully and productively together, kind of set, our own rules of engagement with each other that we all agree to, and that we all want to work by, so that we can be the most efficient and productive together for the community that, we were elected to serve. And so I was seeing it, as a 3 to 4 hour half day meeting, just right away, hopefully, I think we had potentially talked about near the end of May, so that we could start off our meetings in the most productive manner possible, really, on really just I agree with Councillor Bosman's. It's a new, and on a good playing field with each other. And so I find that with some past councils that I've served on, we didn't have this agreed upon set of agreements that where we got together and talked about what was important to each councillor. And I just think if council agreed to do that, I think it might be a really good starting point for good collaborative teamwork. So I would be very supportive of a 3 to 4 hour half day topic with just those two topics.
Gil Diazzi here. I agree that I think the dynamics of the council have changed. I noticed immediately when I got on board a couple weeks ago. And I do think if we just had a very casual, organic retreat that didn't get too heavy, that would be good. And then maybe if we need to talk about other topics, we can bring them up at other study sessions or in new business, because there is one topic that I would like to bring up, but I want to get on board at the city council first. And one of my concerns is the fact that we need to do something about our unhoused population. And, that probably would require a bigger discussion. But it all seems good.
So Olivia, remind me again what you're proposing it's in lieu of.
I think it's a great idea, the retreat. I just think it would be maybe beneficial if you have sat through a couple of these meetings, see how it goes and how it changed, because I can feel the same thing. And then you can, and us as well, everybody on council can have more specific feedback of what we want and how we want to get there to improve performance of the city council. So just to buy a little bit of time, that's all.
I don't disagree with that. When are you kind of thinking, Olivier?
Well, I'll throw it out straight away. I'm pretty much gone the whole month of June.
Oh, okay.
So to me, it's right after maybe the summer break or shortly at the end of the summer break when everybody is available. I mean, I can do it virtual, but the virtual part is not going to be.
Yeah, it's not as
beneficial, I think.
effective. We
No,
want
for
you-
retreat, we all need to be there. During city council meeting weeks, you're gone in July or no?
June is the tricky one. I'll be traveling and depends on the schedule here, but I expect to travel quite a bit, but I'll try and make sure I can attend meetings virtually.
I feel like what you're talking about, Councillor Bozeman's, and what I think City Manager Madrigal, I think there's going to be a lot of overlap in some of this. And so I think we could maybe address a little bit of what you're talking about and kind of in conjunction with, kind of that team building and how do we effectively achieve the same goal of building a better Durango. So there might be a little bit of overlap, and maybe if we don't get to maybe all of it, maybe there's another opportunity further down the road. I don't know.
Wow, I just want to call out, I love that, Dave. Team building and build a better Durango. Yeah, sign me up. I want to get on board. Olivier, could you do it? Would given that you have to leave for June, do you think we could start, end of July still gives us 2 full meetings for counselors, new counselors to experience.
End of May.
Yes, thank you. End of May versus waiting until the end of summer, because that's a long time. And it might be a really productive, healthy, great discussion for us to have. if you're willing to consider end of May, or
What-
yeah, end of May.
What if we just did a doodle poll with half-day availabilities starting the end of May, obviously skipping June, and then maybe July, and see if everyone can be on board? Because it is an important one. I want everyone there in person.
Agreed.
Doodle poll end of May and for beginning of July. Is that what I heard? Correct?
I, I leave on the 26th of May, so it's.
Oh,
has to
okay.
be- and we
Okay.
could do, the schedule is, let me just give you straight away that date. I think it's, well, yeah, it's gonna be June, the end of June. It'll be the 27th. I have to look at the schedule. It's gonna be close. I mean, the first meeting in July, I mean, I'll just commit to that straight away.
Okay, got it.
I know, I'm available, so it doesn't matter to me.
And just to clarify, we're meeting July 5th on Wednesday, not the 4th, correct? Or we are meeting on the 4th for the holiday.
Is it the first or the Wednesday?
I believe we're meeting on the 5th.
The
July
5th, yes. We would not meet on the 4th. But I would assume that you wouldn't want to do, would you want to do the retreat on that day or no?
No.
Okay.
The same day as all the city council meetings?
Yeah.
No,
I'm
absolutely
just
not.
making sure I've got clarity and knowing what we're talking about and
This is
asking.
exhausting enough.
Shall we do the doodle poll? And then.
Yeah, I think that just
End of
do-
May and July?
Yeah,
Okay.
just let's.
End of
let's-
May, but before Olivier leaves, so it would be that week potentially of May 22nd, if it worked for council. Otherwise, we'll go to July.
Yeah, anytime
I-
after the meeting on the 16th, because then we'll have 2 meetings under our belts and I think good to go. So anytime after the 16th. And that you can get Susie and all the things on board. Sorry.
Right.
Thank you.
Wait,
Oh.
wait, sorry. Okay, you know what? I've been to a lot of these meetings to work out our feelings and all that. And I'm just wondering if we could cut it down and, I do appreciate reaching out and letting us know that it'd be good to work through to assist them to be able to be more productive with city council. But is it possible that we could cut it down to like maybe 2 hours and maybe just fit it in before it gets too late past the summer? If we, even if we took time away from some of our other scheduling.
I think the issue is he's gone. And
I
so
know,
that,
so if we could get it in before, like the end of the month here before you leave.
I-
You
yeah,
know,
that's-
if we,
try to do that.
but we can cut it down to a couple hours because by then we're going to know how each of us meet, and how we all interact with other people.
Yeah, that might be a good point. I agree.
I would say let's just see what the facilitator and comes up with and how long she needs or they need. And then go from there, but no more than half day for sure.
I support that. Doodle poll, sounds good.
All right. So now we are moving on to information only items. So first up is sustainability action and indicator report with Marty Poole. Oh, what did I miss? Shoot,
No,
where is
that's
it? Oh,
correct.
here it is. Where? Oh, I'm like, oh my gosh. Just kidding. No.
Our annual stability action report.
So a little bit of background, sustainability and the city's commitment to environmental resource conservation. Oh, thank you. I was wondering where, I thought you said we had a new setup. Anyway, so as you all are probably familiar, environmental sustainability and resilience is one of the 7 strategic plan goals. And sustainability is very much integrated into everything we do here at the city and throughout our community. The vision for a sustainable Durango is that we are a community committed to achieving carbon neutrality, preserving our natural environment, conserving resources, maintaining our unique character, and improving quality of life for the benefit of present and future generations of residents, visitors, and neighboring communities. So how has the city approached sustainability? A little bit of background: in 2015 was the city's first sustainability plan, the Municipal Sustainability Action Plan. Very much a list of actions that the city was doing internally and community-wide. In 2021-22, city staff engaged in a very comprehensive community engagement process for updating the plan. And our new sustainability plan was adopted in the summer of last year. That new plan has 4 priority areas. So it's concerned with reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing renewable electricity generation, preparing our community to be resilient to the impacts of climate change, securing health and well-being benefits that are gained through reduced pollution and conserving natural resources, and implementing these actions in an equitable manner. One level deeper on this plan, we have we split out sustainability into 5 key sector areas, and a big part of this plan was identifying what types of actions fall under what sectors, and that's a majority of what I'll be reviewing with you today. This also aligns with the Lead for Cities framework, which is a nationally recognized, actually internationally recognized framework for sustainability management. I want to touch on the fact that the sustainability plan is a little unique when it comes to city plans. We have a lot of really comprehensive plans across our departments, across what the city is doing. At the highest level, we have our strategic plan and our comprehensive plan that are very overarching in their nature. And then we have a wide number of plans that reduce specific aspects of sustainability, or aspects of one piece of the city's services and operations. So for instance, parks, open space, trails, and recreation. Throughout that plan, there are mentions of sustainability, commitments to sustainability principles. And so the sustainability plan, it very much is designed to interplay between all of these other existing action plans, and these plans that have much more detailed timelines and specific projects and programs. And so we really didn't want to create something that was redundant there, something that really integrated and played nicely with these other plans. So on that note, I just want to really emphasize the fact that though my title is the sustainability manager, and I'm part of the city manager's office and do coordination and collaboration on sustainability across the city and throughout the community. It is definitely not all sustainability work flows through me or my office by any means. Every department, city staff, and community members, it is a collective effort, and sustainability, I'm proud to say, is very much integrated into the work that the city is doing and that we see throughout our community. And so a lot of what I'll be reviewing today, a few of the projects and programs and services are things directly managed through the city manager's office and through the sustainability division. But a vast majority are managed throughout city departments. And I really want to give the credit where credit's due with all of that work. And again, that ties back to this point I'm making here with these plans that guide specific departmental and division efforts. They are committed there's commitment to sustainability in these plans, and it it aligns with what is discussed in the sustainability plan overall. So in mid-March, the city hosted a annual sustainability community engagement forum where we heard presented on the sustainability plan, presented on some of the topics I'll be reviewing today, and asked for that feedback and really looked for those themes, those priorities that are coming out of the community. We also hosted a survey to get more detailed information and feedback from the community. And so some high level takeaways here: climate change and greenhouse gas emissions are by far the top concern of the community. That's comes as no surprise. I think more and more we're seeing the term sustainability almost be synonymous with climate issues and greenhouse gas issues. So, you know, the community members that are giving feedback on this plan are certainly concerned with that issue. The next most touched on issue were water issues. The community is very concerned about our water consumption, water conservation, our water resources, water quality, watershed and ecosystem protections. And, you know, I think it's been great to work with Justin Elkins. He just last night hosted the presentation on the Lake Nighthorse pipeline and how that relates to our community's resilient water supply. And so that's clearly a community top concern, and we're doing good work in that area, and we will continue to have areas where we can put more effort around, especially conservation. And then last but not least, with housing and homelessness being certainly top of mind across the community, we're drawing strong connections around affordability. And when it comes to the integration of transportation, access, and affordability. So owning a vehicle and relying on a vehicle is a huge expense. And so, you know, building a house is one thing, but getting people from that house to their place of work in the most cost-effective and environmentally friendly way possible is also energy efficiency and conservation, and how that can tie to lower cost of living. So the rest of this presentation, you've been provided the Sustainability Action Report. This is an annual commitment tied to the sustainability plan. I don't really want to laundry list, rapid fire everything that has been done across the city and community when it comes to sustainability. So I'm going to try and kind of balance how quickly I move through these things without spending all the time and really getting more into discussion and hearing what your takeaways and thoughts and priorities are. So I will move pretty quickly through these, but happy to address questions at the end of the presentation. So general overall, sustainability division moved under the city manager's office. I was really happy with that move. It's, you know, it's hard. Sustainability efforts, like I said, are being done throughout the city, and sustainability can quote unquote live anywhere. But I was very much honored by the opportunity to work in the city manager's office and be in that cross-departmental position. The Green Business Certification, the Green Durango Grants Program, and the grants that we're bringing into the community, I think show a lot of partnership opportunities, a lot of ways that we're bringing in resources to our community, and other ways that we are incentivizing sustainability work throughout the community. When we're getting into the 5 sectors here, so starting with energy, obviously the energy performance contract has been a lot of work getting up to the point that we are at now, and ready to implement that and save energy and increase renewable energy throughout city operations. The most recent analysis is showing that approximately 40% of our electricity within city limits is now coming from renewable sources. That's because of efforts from Tri-State and LPEA to get more renewable electricity on our grid, but also increased solar installations within city limits. LPEA has really been driving towards more renewable energy in a really fast way in recent years, which is really exciting. And as a community over the past over 5 years, we are actually seeing a per capita reduction in electricity consumption. So it shows that all of these combined efforts are really working. Transportation, we're seeing an increase in transit ridership, which is great. We completed the parking management plan, continued emphasis on transportation demand management and the multimodal programs, which the city is very fortunate to have such commitment to that area of transportation. We have our pilot e-bike rebate program, which is proving to be very popular. And extremely rapid growth in EV utilization. So this graph at the bottom is the amount of kilowatt hours, the amount of energy that the city-owned charging stations have seen over the years. And you can see since we install those fast chargers, just how much we've seen an increase. Consumption and waste, we'll actually be reviewing organics management during the next topic, but hosted another successful hazardous waste program in conjunction with the county. We are seeing, compared to the rest of the state of Colorado, if you look at the numbers that we get from our municipal managed services, we have a really strong recycling rate. And actually we're seeing that trend back in a good direction. But I will say we have to continue to get better data on commercial haulers and other waste streams that are just beyond what the city serves. And so that is something we need to continue to improve and address. Really high performance and results on water quality and improved analysis on water consumption, which over this past year, which generated those graphs that you can see. So this question of like, who's using the most water or where could we conserve more? I think improved data can inform that conversation. And, if we're being honest right now, we don't have water. You see in other communities more aggressive water rates that incentivize conservation stronger. I know there was the water rate study and that conversation is ongoing. So the city is doing a lot, but there are other communities that are using different tools to push conservation stronger. The flip side of that conversation is certainly if you increase prices, then that has an affordability issue. So it's not an easy conversation by any means. Last but not least, we have a lot of wildfire mitigation efforts and trail stewardship, improved wildlife reduction or wildlife conflict reduction efforts, continuing to expand our bear proofing of our waste infrastructure or solid waste infrastructure. And our city arborist, Matt Biesecker, gave that presentation and updates on what the city is doing in our urban forestry plan. Just a ton of excellent work coming, primarily when you think of kind of green spaces and land management. That's a lot of that is done out of our Parks and Rec team, but also through our planning department and how we're utilizing our land and natural systems and interacting with the ecological resources. So Durango, we're doing really well. Honestly, for a community of our size, we have really strong commitment to sustainability. We're seeing incremental and really positive progress across multiple sectors. Right now, our only formally adopted sustainability goals around greenhouse gas emissions and renewable electricity. And so if council is interested, there are opportunities to set more firm goals around other resource conservation concerns, such as waste diversion rates, water consumption, things like that. Greenhouse gas is very reliant on the direction that LPEA takes. We are not an electric utility, so we're tied to and have to work with them on achieving those renewable energy goals and water conservation as a continued theme. So thank you all for allowing me to give that review of everything going on. Happy to answer questions and recognize we're also a little bit over time. So however we want to spend the rest of this time.
Thank you, Marty. We are a little bit over time. We're 2 minutes over where we're supposed to be right now, but we also have a 10-minute break we can forego, or if we decide to go over, and so we can just play it by ear. Does anyone on council have any questions or comments for Marty?
Thanks for obviously giving that presentation. Just really quickly, the EV stations and the kilowatts used, that's a pretty marked increase from 21 to 22. Are we seeing more EV stations built and that's the reason for the increase, or is just more people using it?
That's a great question. It's both. We're seeing more number of sessions, and we're in fall of 2021, the city installed those 2 fast chargers. And so in terms of the total energy used at those stations, that's really being driven by the use of those fast chargers. We see a big increase associated with tourism season. So we know is really closely tied to not only our residents using those resources, but they can also charge at home, right? But visitors are quite dependent on those fast chargers.
That was my next question, is like who's using them? And then that's all I got. Thanks.
Along that same line, I'm just going to jump in on the same EV charging. We have the transit center and the library now.
That's correct. So we have, so level 2 is our kind of medium, slow speed. And then there's the fast charger. So we have 6 plugs at the level 2 at the transit center. We will have 4 of the level 2 plugs going in at the library this summer. That'll be completed this summer. We have 2 fast charging plugs at the transit center, and we just joined in on a grant application for 4 more fast chargers at the transit center.
And then on that same note, I was going to ask, is there any future ones going in for there? Any other potential locations or grants or?
So the transit center is the top identified location for the city as far as city-owned properties, and the library is the second priority property. The rec center has also been identified. That's a little more challenging because that's county land. We lease the rec center land from the county. So just in terms of a project management standpoint, it needs more buy-in and kind of joint effort. And there's also a question of the need in that area of town. Beyond the city-owned sites, we're seeing a lot of investment in the private sector. And so there's going to be a question over the years of how much do we just let the private sector move on this and, you know, create codes or just be friendly to private sector growth, or how much does the city want to kind of drive that infrastructure growth? We'll have discussions in the future about that. Yeah.
Well, that rapid growth in that EV utilization is phenomenal. And then Melissa or Mayor Youssef texted and said she's having a hard time hearing people. So really speak into the microphones. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Also really quick, Marty, are those revenue producing stations or is that just a donation to the community?
That's a great question. So the revenue off of the level 1 chargers basically just offsets the electricity cost. The revenue generated from the fast chargers is a net positive to the city. It's not a ton. It's on the order of maybe $5,000 a year per station. But if we see increased utilization, we could see increased revenue in that area. So it'll be a while till those first stations pay for themselves, and then same with this next cycle. But because we are getting a substantial portion of the previous stations and these upcoming stations are grant funded by state funds, the city is only paying about 10 to 20% of the cost of installing those stations. So we actually will be revenue positive. It depends on usage trends, but anywhere from 7 to 15 years, but that's a very ballpark number. If we see 3 times the use, then that payback reduces by 3 times. So
Cool. Thank you.
I wanted to thank you for that report, Marty. I think it's really interesting to see on how much the share of our electricity use comes from renewable sources, how the waste diversion rates how do we do in waste diversion rates, which is pretty impressive. the soil lab community. I mean, it ranges the whole thing. Yeah, the bear proof cans. I think it's nice to have that summary. And I looked at the 2022 sustainability plan, and then this sustainability action report. So can you provide a little background on how this is moving forward on the sustainability plan? Are they the update or the review period? And then do we get annual sustainability action reports? And then on the sustainability plan, it had a lot of metrics and indicators. Is that something that assume you still keep track of it, but
All great questions. Thank you, Councilor Boswell.
a lot of them.
So the vision for the plan is to have the plan not go through a comprehensive update for probably several years, and to have this commitment to these annual updates be the chance to hear from the community about if there are changing priorities, and then give the summary to council every year. And so annually this will be a tradition. And as far as the indicator, I struggled when I was putting together this report for council with, we have those spreadsheets and it's pretty extensive data. It's 15 indicators across anywhere from 15 to 20 indicators for every of the sectors. So we're getting into like 50 or more points of data and the different trends you could see from that data. And so I didn't, just put table after table and spreadsheet after spreadsheet into this report. That data is available to the public or to any counselor that would be interested in like a more specific dive into like a specific data point in these in what we're measuring around sustainability. And I think the goal eventually that we're working towards is to have some type of visualization and dashboard for that data tied into some of the other efforts that we're seeing out of the other departments for that data visualization.
I appreciate it. I remember when we had the discussion on the sustainability plan, and it was specifically one of the comments and the recommendations was to don't measure so much and don't do all the indicators so much. You do still, but I want to see more action. And this report shows all the action. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
On that note, Devin one time had a KPI report that had like our performance indicators and certain things, and it was like green for good, yellow for okay, red for we're not doing so good. And that was so easy for me to just I don't need to dive in and see all the spreadsheets of numbers. It's quicker. I don't need to know oh, we're on track for this many in sustainability. And so as you're putting together that dashboard and what it looks like in the future, I love that. It was just super user friendly and easy for me.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we identify in the plan is the trends that we would like to see. And yeah, that's a great idea to say how quickly are we trending in the right direction, or are we somewhat stagnant? Do we need to address that? That's great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Marisa?
Thank you. No comments really, except for thank you so much, Marty, for your continued effort. So important for the city. I too am very happy you're in the city manager's office, close and available. So thanks for all your efforts.
Okay, we're gonna move on. We're like 10 minutes behind, but you get to stay. Yep. We're going to direction needed items. A post. And then if anyone else needs to come up. Yeah. Excellent. We have lots of chairs. Yeah.
This presentation will be shorter, we'll have more time for discussion on this. Specifically related to what is referred to as organic waste management. So food scraps, yard waste, basically anything biological that breaks down is considered organic waste material. And subsection, an important subsection of that organic waste management is food scrap. Making food scraps diverted from landfill instead of compost. Sorry, thanks, Ben. Mayor Youssef, I hope you could hear most of that. So an important part of organic waste management is specifically food waste management and diverting food scraps from the landfill to composting. Composting is important. It improves, you create compost. So instead of all of those nutrients going to the landfill and kind of going away forever, you're reintroducing those nutrients into the soil for farmers and gardeners, which is extremely important alongside the greenhouse gas benefits of instead of the food rotting and turning into methane in the landfill, we are turning it into compost, and it has much lower greenhouse gas emissions being managed that way. So quick background, in 2015, there was a regional waste study that looked actually across Archuleta and La Plata and Montezuma and San Juan counties, and then also looked in La Plata and city limits Durango, specifically around our food waste makeup, or excuse me, our municipal solid waste composition and makeup, and what the opportunities at that time were for increased recycling, increased diversion, getting those materials out of the landfill. So that study showed that about food waste represents about 20 to 25% of Durango's waste stream. And that was across both commercial and residential, though commercial we're seeing slightly higher, mostly driven by the restaurants and hospitality. It has really potent greenhouse gas impacts when it's landfilled. So in response to that study and other calls for improved organics waste management, the city issued a request for proposals in the summer of 2021 and reviewed submissions. Table to Farm Compost was the selected bidder on that process. And so we've signed under contract and have now been under contract with Table to Farm for a little over a year and a half. And so the city's commitment there is to promote Table to Farm as a resource for community members to utilize for composting services. And Table to Farm has continued to expand their operations. We, in the fall of 2022, Table to Farm was awarded a Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, CDPHE grant, and has been performing, along with the city, a market study to see, what motivates people to opt into composting services and what some barriers may be for continuing services. So this is a really exciting graph. You thought the EV graph was interesting. This one is also pretty exponential. So obviously we're seeing an increase in growth from 2015 when the original waste study was performed through now. That continued growth in tons of diverted is already pretty laudable. But then in 2022, this huge jump, and Table to Farm can speak more to this, but that is from gaining some really key commercial accounts, specifically Ska Brewing and a few others, grocery stores where you see these really high levels of food waste generation. And so all of a sudden this source that was going to the landfill, all the spent beer mash and waste from the grocery stores, is now being composted. So the discussion today will be around, what does the future hold for organics management at the city? Currently, we have an opt-in model. Folks can sign up for Table to Farm service. We're seeing a good amount of growth in that area. But studies from other communities indicate that that will eventually plateau, and that's no surprise, right? When you're asking people to take on a new commitment, we saw a very similar sort of decision point that the city faced about a decade ago around recycling. It was kind of an opt-in, sort of manage yourself system, and the city eventually decided to make it, mandatory citywide across residential services, and then offer it more comprehensively to commercial services. So, what is the going off the commitment the city has in the sustainability plan and in the strategic plan to increase waste diversion, reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with waste with organic waste. What is the route to continue to capture that food waste? So city, what does it take to get to citywide composting and organics diversion? There's a lot of different routes the city could take. We're here to start that conversation. But the two main areas for discussion really center around funding and any changes or updates to the city code, either the municipal code or the land use code. And so some quick review of funding, and then I'll do a quick review of code, and then we can jump into discussion. But the market study indicates that the main barrier for continuing service is cost of service. So not surprising when you're asking people to sign up for a new payment that they're making every month. The study indicates that $15 a month is kind of what everyone thinks the rate could be, or what they would be interested in signing up at. The current rate from Table to Farm is $28 a month, which is, we did a review of other communities in Colorado and actually nationwide, and that's right on par with the average that you're seeing for compost service throughout the country and Colorado. So one way to bring that cost down, and for different sectors of our population, would be through some kind of subsidy. So some identified, worked with the Devin, or I guess acting CFO, but strategic plan and budget officer, to identify some potential funds that city council could consider. So the community support fund is a similar type of fund where the city puts funds towards services that are provided by outside entities, such as the Humane Society, or I believe MANA, or, funding for MANA's services comes out of that fund. The city has a utility rebate program. So for income qualified users, an opportunity to reduce their utility bills. And then lodgers tax, city council does have that discretionary fund, which, one idea would be that hotels and restaurants, specifically because they serve visitors. So that could be a fund. And then sort of to be determined on the bag fee fund, we really don't know what that revenue is going to look like this year or into future years, because just of how that law gets implemented. For those of you that aren't familiar, that was a state law that it mandates a 10-cent fee on all single-use bags from retail stores, and 60% of that goes to the city, and specifically into the sustainability office fund, sustainability programs fund. On the code side, so chapter 10 of the municipal code is the section that addresses waste management specifically, and organics management and definitions are not addressed currently. And so that would be an opportunity to see what other communities have in their code, study what types of changes to a code could be legally allowable, or would, result in the kinds of changes that council may wish to see. And then obviously, if there's any ongoing discussion of fees around organics waste management specifically, that would align with how fees, the legal structure of chapter 10 of the city code, and how trash and recycling fees are currently managed. So I won't read this part, but leave it up on the screen for our discussion. Some short-term is budget appropriations discussions, if there's interest for this budget cycle or future budget cycles, committing to organics management. And then what if any review would city council like to see around potential code or fee changes regarding organics management. And then Monique and Taylor are here with Table to Farm to answer any specific questions about their services. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Marty. Okay, let's open it up for questions, comments, city council.
Well, you paid for the whole seat, but you're only going to need the edge. So if the city does subsidize it, just my back of the napkin math, if we're taking 28 from, or 15 from 28, that leaves 13 per user over 12 months by roughly 1,000 users. That's about $156,000 a year that we would be subsidizing. Is that, did I get that correct? Ish? Is that what you're looking for? Potentially, if we're only going to do $15 for the end user?
I don't know if I have a specific number of the like what you're requesting. I think where I would start the conversation is what sectors, what accounts could we be identified, and then what would the rate be? But yeah, if you multiply 6,000 accounts, or yeah, say if we're going max end of the road, 6,000 accounts by $13, and then you have to multiply that by 12 months a year. Yeah, so I don't have my calculator out, but I could do that.
So the 1,000 for the opt-in model, the roughly 1,000 units, that's $156,000 per year. Doing 6,000, that would be roughly, 800,000 per year.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so basically I do my own composting at home and it's usually about a big coffee can this big per week. Now, to me, that doesn't sound very cost effective to go to residents and have them pay $13, $28 a month to pick it up 4 times a week to make soil. So maybe it might be a good idea that maybe you guys just consider commercial accounts right now and see what it looks like in the future, and then encourage the residential people to learn how to compost, and then just open it up somewhere where they can deliver their potential soil items.
Yes, we always encourage anyone to compost on their own. In fact, when we lose some of our customers and they're composting at home, that's a success for us. So absolutely. I think what other communities have done is talk about composting generally. There's different ways you could do it. There's drop-off sites. So if, particular households don't create as much organic matter, you could drop it off once a month. If you would like a weekly service because you create that much, that's something that you can choose to do. But I think Table to Farm Compost is here to provide one service that is a weekly pick up and drop off service. But when other communities have gone citywide, you look at a whole multitude of possibilities, including drop off, including, people composting at their own. So we would hope that all of those options would be available.
I'm also pro composting, and I compost myself. So I'm a bit in the same boat where I think it's it's a bit tough for low income families or small families or individuals to be burdened with an extra fee if they have so little to compost. So that's a little bit where I'm struggling. But I do know that a lot of Western countries in Europe, they do composting and structured through the city or the town. One question I had is on the funds you mentioned, you didn't include the trash and recycle fund, which has a balance of 3 million-ish and is running a positive budget. Is there a reason why that? Because in the trash and recycle fund, by the name alone, you would say that's a perfect spot.
No, that's an excellent question. So that gets back to our review of Chapter 10 of the Municipal Code and how the City Council's authority to set trash and recycle fees, and the fact that composting and organics management isn't defined currently in that code. And so we would maybe ask for more legal review from, the city attorney, but it, on the first pass review, it didn't seem like council had the authority to direct those fees to organic waste management just because it's not defined or addressed in the code currently.
That would probably be an easy, I'm just guessing here, an easier solution than to make modifications on the larger stacks or the bag fee or all those, and it would make it very clean, as in trash and recycling includes compost. The needs, if you look at the needs, I think the table to what is it? Anyway, you were building another facility, no? And wasn't there a big grant that you got for an extension of the facility?
Yes, we received another RREO grant, the same funding that paid for this market study through CDPHE it paid in part for a class 3 compost facility. That class 3 is how CDPHE classifies its compost. It's 1, 2, or 3. So that is complete as of last December. That also was a simultaneous La Plata County permit for basically a commercial facility. So yeah, the timing is good for us to look at scaling up, at our facility. So it's a good point. There's hauling, to move organics around, and then there's the processing at a facility. There's only 16 class 3 compost facilities in the state of Colorado. And I think the last class 3 compost facility to be permitted was ours, and it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago before the last one was permitted. So the threshold is kind of high, and it's a challenging process, but we're happy to have one here in the community. So that is a key piece.
And on the facility that you are expanding, is there a certain indication of when it would be operational? And assuming your numbers now multiplied by 6, you have 1,000 customers now. If it becomes 6 times that amount, is that the capacity that you can process, or is that only a small fraction? Do you have over or under capacity, or how does that look?
Yes, we're currently operating, and the full capacity at any given time is 18,000 cubic yards of in-process material. And compost takes anywhere from 6 months to a year to fully process and cure. So it gives us a lot of room for growth. It's about a 5-acre facility.
Excuse me, is that 18 yards per month, per day, per week?
18,000 cubic yards at any given point in time of in-process material. So it kind of depends how quickly, the microorganisms can only work as fast as they work, but generally it's anywhere 6 months to a year. We could even get that down potentially to 3 months. It depends on how we manage. So there's a little bit of flexibility there.
And could you, it was up on a graph there, but could Taylor or Monique, could you clarify in an average month, or maybe a high month, between both food waste collections, and then they also collect like woody material, and sawdust and wood scraps to combine, kind of all told, how many cubic yards are you collecting in a month?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Marty. I think your graph up there is probably the closest indication. I think that was 1,600 tons a year.
1,600, so about 1,000, give or roughly ballpark.
Yeah, it's about 2 cubic yards per ton is kind of the rough.
Okay, so
rough
2,000 cubic yards a month.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty close. Do you agree?
And so recognizing that we caught up on time, but don't want to go too far over, we have the direction needed items up there. Really, they pertain to any additional conversation around funds that council sees as appropriate to provide subsidies, or what pockets of the population or sectors there's interest in exploring, and then also the interest in staff exploring this review of a code and fee update I'll note that there's a USDA grant open right now that would be an excellent fit for that if we wanted to.
I want us to be able to give Marty the direction he needs real quick. So let's kind of focus on that funding piece real quick and where council kind of wants to see him look or explore. At least this is not saying that this is where it's going to come out of. It's just saying like, hey, like take the next steps forward. Let's continue looking if we feel like this is an important step for the city. I'm going to just really quick, because Councilor Bosman's, I feel like did bring up a good point, because immediately when I heard about this, I was thinking, wait, okay, how does recycling work? Does everyone have to do it? How much do we pay? Does everyone pay? And I'm not saying you know that because, oh, you do. Okay, great. Perfect. Does everyone pay for recycling, even if you don't utilize it? Because not everyone has a recycling bin.
So it gets a little tricky, but in a quick nutshell, residential accounts are required to pay for trash and recycling. Commercial accounts, which is traditional commercial, what you'd picture, but that's also apartments and condos. Any of those sites can choose who they have as their hauler. So residential, you have to use, or you are automatically charged for city municipally run trash and recycle collections. Commercial accounts can choose whoever they want. So they could choose Waste Management or GFL, or they could sign up with the city too. They can choose that as their hauler. And you're not required as a commercial account to do recycling unless you have 8 or more residential units.
Interesting. How much does a resident pay? Do you know, per month or per year for recycling?
It's for trash or I want to be accurate with those numbers, so I'll get back to you, but it's in the range of $10 to $20 a month for trash and $10 to $20 a month for recycle.
And I know Councilor Bosman said we had a fund balance in trash and recycling. I also remember a presentation, and I wanted to bring this up for new councilors, especially, where we discussed facility needs and then not being able to buy trash trucks. And that's part of the reason we had some fund balance, because they weren't available. And so that's why it was there. And so I just want to be careful, because sometimes fund balances are put out there and it's like, oh my gosh, we do have this money. And, you know, if we could only needed $100,000 or whatever to offset this, why not take it? But I just always want to be cautious, because I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, because it's been a minute since, but we've talked about it.
Yes, there's a couple things with the 3 million number. I don't have it off the top of my head. I'm talking with Devin a bit, but there always is a reserve fund that you want to keep for operations, making sure that we're able to continue providing services if there was an instance where we didn't receive funding for whatever reason or disaster. So I'm not exactly sure if that's taken into account of that. It may not be.
And for council, we have fund policies. It's like 25% we have to keep in there. And so sometimes when you hear these numbers, that's, you know, we just have to realize that.
And then there is I know Allison unfortunately is COVID positive and wasn't able to be here, but I do believe that they're also looking at some recycling center upgrades that they were using for that, or looking to utilize some of that extra fund balance for as they were building it up.
So I, as one counselor, am happy to dive into that one city code to fix the language. So maybe trash and recycling does include that. I'm willing to look into the fund balance and exactly what we need it for in trash and recycling, and if there's any available. And but I'm also curious as one counselor, because the bag fee is interesting because it's new and we don't have a use for it yet, you know, and so, and nor do we know how much it's going to be or how much we're going to collect, but that's intriguing to me because we don't have a use for it yet. I'm a fan of, if we want to meet our sustainability goals, we have to put our money where our mouth is a little bit. And like show our residents that we are committed to this and passionate about it. And so, you know, I'm open to exploring those things. I'm also super cognizant of our cost of living here in Durango is, you know, a little, I want to try to keep that in check as much as possible. So adding even $12 to someone's bill, mandating that's a little bit of a, like, makes me pause. Just gonna throw that out there. I'm loved what Counselor Yazzie said about maybe let's attack the commercial piece because it's like we get obviously see huge gains from that. And it's interesting that commercial is not mandated to do recycling. And so maybe a mandate, I'm just throwing this out there to take a look as one counselor. So just ideas for other counselors to think about. Recycling and maybe composting in one fell swoop for a commercial. I don't know, just ideas. Other counselors?
Yeah, I don't,
Oh.
sorry, go ahead.
I agree with pretty much everything you said. Oh man, I lost my thought. Go ahead. Let me just, you just add everything.
I agree with the points. The only one thing that I want to also discuss, typically the city will retain ownership of containers, commercial or residential. So the upfront cost of all of the containers, who would pony that money up? And then, are we going to bear proof, or are we going to look at some sort of viable solution there? And then if something breaks or somebody loses their container, whatever the case may be, who's on the hook for getting getting that container back?
I just got it back. It was to tie to the capacity of the current facilities to get I would like to see what is Table du Farm able to process now. If we do this and when everybody all of a sudden starts putting in their best efforts, then are we able to do it, or but is it worthwhile to look at how this growth takes place with SCA going through the roof in their amount of recyclable material? So to me, I think keep it simple is always the best in my opinion. I don't like to see additional fees. The bag fee is a good idea. That would maybe be a very good option. But I do think we can buy some time just to look at the trend and how the volumes increase maybe more and how the capacity to treat it.
Counselor Youssef, Mayor Youssef, you haven't spoke. Do you?
I'm just listening, and I really agree. Thank you for asking. I think you guys are bringing up some really, really good points. I like where this discussion is going. I like the idea of looking at fund balances and also the language and revisiting, kind of continuing this discussion, because I think we're on to some good potential direction here in this area that I haven't heard us take before that I'm excited about. So I support the discussion that you are all having there live.
I think it's anecdotal, but I think there's also something to be said about there's other facilities, I guess, within our community that could maybe take on some of the burden. I know that there's a farmer in Breen that we, at El Moro, we would always give them to them, and we just did it for free, and he fed the pigs, and it's kind of full circle. But I know that there's other farms that also take, like James Ranch, that might take spent grain, like from Steamworks as well. So if you guys ever do run into some of those headwinds, that there's other facilities that could potentially offset.
The permitting process takes a really long time.
Go ahead. Sorry, Counselor.
I have one last comment. I do think sustainability is really critical for this community and actually for the world. Even though I emphasize the fact that we should look at the commercial, because I can see the cost there isn't as much as the residential cost, but part of this whole sustainability push is educating the community. So if we could just add education component to the reasons why we should do the, farm to city to farm?
Table to farm.
Table to farm push is because we got to think about the future and how sustainable that we'll leave the earth for future populations.
Okay. Marty, is there anything else you need from us?
No, I think some great points, and I do have the takeaways for how to proceed. I did want to clarify for new counselors. So our trash and recycle is managed under Public Works. So that's the Public Works Director, Allison Baker, and then Joey Medina is our trash and recycle manager. And so conversations around that fee would definitely include, they would be at the table at that point as well. So, but thank you for the direction. Like I said, I think there's some exciting grant opportunities actually for putting together some more comprehensive plans and to get some of this funding and legal review at, little to no cost for the city. And certainly there's the in-house, plans we can put together. So thanks for the time. We ate back up our, our time, but appreciate both opportunities to come before you today. So
Thank you so much, Marty. How does council feel about just like a 4-minute break real quick, and then we'll be 5 minutes behind instead of 10? Is that good? Okay. So back here at 3:50. Yeah, it was great. So thank you so much. And then hopefully you guys just presented last month or whatever, because that was for upcoming. Yeah, thank you. Cool. I don't know. Melissa, are you on? I just want to make sure you're there.
Sorry, yep, I'm back.
Awesome. Thank you.
Are you ready?
I know. I think. Okay, welcome back to the study session. We have our last item, which is parks, open space and trails, parks and multimodal retreat modifications. And we have Devin Schmidt, Turi Nykum, and Sarah Hill joining us. Is that it? That's all of you. Okay.
Excellent. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Devin Schmidt, acting CFO. As Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, we do have Sarah Hill and Turi Nykum. And so what we're going to take City Council through this afternoon is the priorities and the outcomes from the February 14th and 15th council retreat, where council discussed priorities for the city to focus on for the near term. These priorities did include housing, facilities, parks and rec, open space and trails, parks and multimodal transportation, streets, bridges and alleys, as well as storm drainage. And council deliberated on each priority area and gave direction to staff for each priority. So this presentation will focus on the parks, open space and trails, as well as the 2015 sales tax, as well as transportation. So they're all pretty mingled together. So I know we're trying to make up some time here, so we'll take you quickly kind of through the presentation and what staff has prepared. So the objective of this item is to provide a summary of the outcomes from the council retreat and then just clarify next steps for council direction and get some direction from council on how to proceed. So for council and for the community's reminder, these were the priorities that were ranked by council at the retreat. 5 being the highest priority, which includes facilities and housing, followed by streets, bridges and alleys, parks and recreation, storm drainage and transit, all were in that secondary category. So as kind of a little bit of a refresher, based on how council ranked the priorities from the retreat on the first day, staff then provided the following scenarios. So if a priority ended up in an option A, that was really to fund all strategic plan initiatives that staff could accomplish. Option B was funding part of the initiatives in the strategic plan. And then option C was minimal growth and service reductions to meet revenue requirements. So you can see where some of those priority areas ended up based on the different options. So this is a refresher from the retreat. And so facilities, this kind of just goes over the different forecasted revenues, forecasted expenditures, where there's some potential gaps in funding and then potential funding options. What we heard from council at the retreat was to pursue this option A and consider the renewal of the $0.25 of the 2005 sales tax for funding for facility needs. For parks, open space and trails options, this was to pursue an option A with an updated list of projects. So staff has brought that back today for council consideration, as well as a few different areas or avenues to present on what that would look like, as well as considering if half of the $0.25, so that would be 1/8 of a cent going to transportation. Staff did look into that. And so we'll be providing additional information on that as well. For Parks and Multimodal, this was to pursue an option A, but return to council with a project list that's incorporating multimodal and parks plans. And so that we'll cover here in the upcoming slides as it relates to that direction from council from the retreat. And then transportation was an option C, which as we had described at the council retreat follow-up, that would result in service reductions by the year 2027. We did return to council today with some funding options as a potential, looking at that 05 reauthorization as council had directed. So what we're here to talk about today, now that we've given just a brief recap of the retreat. So we will cover kind of quickly facilities and what that would look like for the 05 if that were reauthorized. To cover that portion of it, the parks space opens trails. So this is really looking at that option A with an updated list and a portion of that going to transportation. Parks and Multimodal, looking at that 2015 sales tax and with a revised project list, and then what impacts potentially for transportation. So when we're looking at all of these different options and scenarios, and I did want to make a little caveat, and I apologize, the little narrative is covered up by my talking, but that does say that the city would not operate in a negative fund balance. This is just reflective of the project's needs, and staff will continue to pursue grant opportunities. So you can see on that first bar chart, and in 2023 as well as 2025, those orange areas where you can see that grants are already pursued. So with those opportunities, it's hard to come up with what the out years are going to look like until a grant opportunity presents itself. So that's why those are not included on the list, but just wanted to make that point of clarification. And so what this is really looking at is combined parks and recreation and multimodal, and the needs in both of those areas all the way through 2030. So you have the different bar charts showing grants, operations, capital, CIP, which is capital improvement projects. The total revenue is reflective of the blue line. Total expenditures is green. And then you can see that fund balance. And again, staff would not present to council a negative fund balance for any budgetary year. It's just meant to be reflective of the needs and the requests based on the plans. So diving in a little bit more into the data. So our revenue forecast is really based on 7 years of historic data from the 2015 sales tax. On average, revenue is projected to increase by about $184K per year. Grant revenues and expenses are included for projects that are pertaining to this tax. A negative fund balance could have a potential impact on the general fund. So as staff, as we were looking at these different funding scenarios, if, let's say, for example, Parks and Recreation had to absorb some of those funds in the 2015, or if the 2005 did go away completely, that would obviously have some impacts on the general fund if those for maintenance needs and for other areas. So we did look at this pretty holistically. So just wanted to add that note there. And then based on the current project list, the fund is really projected to have expenses greater than the revenue 6 out of the next 8 years. So again, that's based off of the current project list that exists in multimodal and in Parks and Recreation. And the fund balance would be projected to go into that negative position in year 2025. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Turi to kind of dive in a little bit more detail. So take it away, Turi.
Thank you, Devin. Turi Nyken, Parks and Recreation Director. I'll just start off by saying that our CIP planning process is just kicking off for this year. And while you have negative fund balances, as Devin said, we will be looking at those. We'll be going through a prioritization process with our current boards, but also with the newly formed financial advisory board. So as you look at these, these numbers really just kind of reflect the capital projects that we have on our list right now. The one thing that I will also note is we are working with our numbers, and they're kind of, I would say, dynamic. We're getting some additional information daily, monthly. We just started getting information on some bridges, pedestrian bridges, namely the Demon Bridge and the bridge below Santa Rita Park, that they are probably in need of some either replacement or renovation. So we started including some of those numbers. So that's why you might see a big dip in 2025, is because we started including some of those numbers in these CIPs. And as was mentioned, we will be trying to level that out and get to a positive fund balance. The next two slides really kind of hone in on the 2015 fund, sales and use tax fund. And we put together this slide based on, like I said, those CIPs that are currently on our list. And then, so this slide is really kind of, if we reauthorized at the full amount for the 2005, there would really be no change in this fund right now. The next slide, which is very similar, what this reflects is starting in 2027, if we didn't reauthorize, we would be taking a lot of those items that were in the 25, such as open space, fire mitigation, maintenance projects that we have going on, as well as trail and rec improvements. And then we do also an interfund transfer to our general fund to cover some of our parks operations expenses out of the 2005 fund. So those funds that we typically take out of 05 would be then transferred over to 2015, starting in 2027. So the CIPs would remain the same, but some of those miscellaneous maintenance type things would go into 2015. So I hope I explained that. Some of the main projects that we have in the 2015 fund through 2030 include Lake Nighthorse, Durango Mesa Park, and Lake Nighthorse is an access road. We'll be repairing the access road from the entrance station all the way down to the swim beach. Durango Mesa Park, which we're in our third year, actually our second year. Next year will be our third year of trying to get a bike park built up there. Improvements to Chapman Ski Hill, some replacement renovations to 3 sections of the Animas River Trail. And then we also have in there a potential new park at Community 3 Springs, which would include a pickleball courts and dog park. So that's kind of, I know I brought up pickleball, sorry about that. But it is in our CIP plan right now. And like I said, as we go through our CIP planning process and prioritization process, some of these projects might actually get bumped off of this list so that we can get a positive fund balance. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
And if I can add just one piece, sorry, before you jump in, Mrs. Hill, there is a list of all of the projects included too. So if that's helpful for council to have that listing, just wanted to provide that.
Oh, can I jump in with a question on specifically what you just said? Is this the list that you're referring to? So I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this is a lot of information, a lot of tables and graphs, and it's really hard to see where we're going. What is the direction we're going? But I did flip through this sheet for a second. Can I ask you a specific question on this sheet? If this is the basis for this presentation, then I wanted to just have it clarified. Is that okay with you all?
We definitely need to keep moving, but so I don't know what you think is the most effective, Devin, if you want to all questions at the end, or do you want interjection on occasion?
Either way is fine. Yeah.
Just as long as it's like short, sweet.
Well, the reason why I think it's important to ask now is because
I was just going to ask, I wasn't sure what sheet Councillor Bosman's was referring to, because I hear him saying this sheet, but of course I can't see it.
Sorry, yeah.
The Parks and Recreation Transit and Multimodal 2005 and 2000. Was this in the packet?
No, it's not.
No. Oh, it's not in the packet, Melissa.
So
Okay.
Melissa, I think you're going to miss it.
Sarah's going to email it to Melissa.
Okay.
right now.
Sarah's emailing it to you right now.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
I'll ask the question because if this is what I see with my 2-minute look at this, it might impact everything else that you're going to present. Is because the numbers seem a bit confusing to me. Yeah. Shall I, if I take this document, you have the Parks and Rec 2015 sales tax 05 renewed. And then I take the other page, which is the 05 not renewed. Yeah, the same table, except one is the 215, page 5 and page 2. Sorry, it's easier. Why is the cost going up of operations if it's not renewed? And I looked at the next page and I see that of the projects in 2027 and 2028, if it's not renewed, you increased the projects.
That's correct, because some of those projects from the 2005 tax fund are being transferred over to 2015. And it's not the capital projects, it's what we're kind of identifying as operations. And those are things we generally fund, like our community forest plan by $50,000 a year. We do a interfund transfer to Parks and Recreation for not only
200,000.
parks,
Yeah.
but also recreation projects and things like that in operations. So
So this is a lot more complex than it seems because
it's a very complex document and there's a lot of moving pieces and parts.
okay, yeah, this is going to be tough.
Well, I think and also for all counselors this is like high level, like what do we want to fund and where do we want to fund it from is kind of the direction we're looking at. We're not authorizing transfers or funds or saying we're going out to ballot tomorrow. Like this is just more of like high level discussion in a study session. And so let's not try to get so bogged down, I think.
No, and I didn't mean to. It's just if that was an error of some sort, then it would have impacted the whole discussion. But it's not an error. It's a transfer that somehow it's not visible. Appreciate that.
Okay, yeah, and I'm Sarah Hill. I'm the transportation director. And this slide that we're looking at here is specific to the multimodal CIP that's funded through the 2015. And this is the current state. So this includes, like Turi said, our 5-year CIP plan right now that was adopted last year. And that's an annual process. So we will be reviewing that starting next month. Sometimes. And then it also includes ongoing maintenance and implementation of projects that are identified in the ADA transition plan and the multimodal transportation plan. And then you can see in 2023, that orange bar indicates the grant awards that we have been awarded for offsetting some of the costs from the fund. And like Devin said, we are going to be continuing to seek and identify grant funding opportunities for the CIP program. So that will also change, where the fund balance falls in this graph. And yeah, just wanted to illustrate the need for the 2015 half cent for both of our CIP programs, Parks and Rec and multimodal.
It doesn't increase at all. So you think that your operation levels will stay the same?
For the multimodal CIP, there's no
Yeah.
operation. Well, that's not true entirely. We're adding a request for ongoing maintenance, which would be an operation cost, but that will be pretty nominal compared to the rest. The rest will be capital projects. And then in the handout, it's page 8 that refers to what our multimodal CIP plan is funding right now. Some of those larger projects are the Downtown Camino Crossing Project, the College and 8th Safety Project, Midtown Safety and Connectivity Project, which is identifying kind of the area that Councilor Bosman's brought up earlier at Rotary Park to Animas Brewing Company to the north side of downtown there. 32nd Street Traffic Calming Project, implementation of our ADA transition plan, Downtown's Next Steps, Rusa Avenue Connect. This is all in 1 year. And then we have a number projects that are listed there for the subsequent years within the 5-year CIP.
I know we have a $3 million grant for next, or for this year. Right, is that right? Yes. Okay.
We have multiple grants that total.
3 million, not I should say, yeah. Has that, I know we've gotten more grants since COVID. What was typical pre-COVID for grants for us?
For our capital project?
Yeah.
It's really project specific. We have, I'm looking at Devin, he's the keeper of our multimodal grants, but we typically have a pretty good success rate with our construction phase. So this includes both design and construction of our CIP. We typically go out for construction phase grants, and we're pretty successful with those.
In Parks and Rec.
And on the Parks and Recreation side, yes, we've been relatively successful as well to do capital, namely through Great Outdoors Colorado. GOCO is kind of restructuring what they're funding and how they're funding. So those funds may not be as readily available for smaller projects, but we are definitely looking at a large centennial grant through GOCO for Durango Mesa Park, which could be upwards of $5 million. So we are pursuing grant opportunities as well.
So we could assume pretty okay that there'll be some grants happening, even though we don't see them.
And there is, quite a substantial amount of new grant funding available for these type of infrastructure projects in the bipartisan infrastructure bill and also at the state level.
Thank you.
Are you able to get like some grants to renew year over year, or is that just kind of again a case by case basis?
That's mainly operating. Yeah, our capital projects are typically just project specific. That's back to Devin.
Can I ask
Hey.
a question?
Yes.
I'm looking at the agenda doc for this item and trying to understand kind of, I'm looking at the background and what the presentation is going to focus on and potential next steps and timeline. And I guess I'm trying to understand exactly, I'm a little bit confused by the agenda doc, trying to understand what the various options for the various 6 different items that we identified as priorities with the past council, kind of what we're trying to do. And so I was wondering if someone could clarify. Can I take a second to ask a few more detailed questions about exactly that so I understand what you're kind of asking for direction on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So facilities, option A, you want to have we discussed renewal of a quarter of the 2005 half-cent sales tax. So a quarter of the full half-cent sales tax, or basically half of it. Which one are you looking at for that?
So this would be basically the current state. So we have a $0.25 currently that is utilized to pay for Florida Road and the library.
Okay.
And so that would be reauthorizing that for facilities.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And then the parks, open space and trails, option A is using 1/8 of renewal of that same tax. Only the other quarter?
Yes, this is all the same tax we're talking about. It's just Parks and Rec and open space has a quarter, and they're saying 1/8 potentially if we want to transit of that quarter.
Okay, so basically we would take half of it would go to facilities that used to fund the library and Florida Road, and the other half could potentially fund parks, open space and trails, and transportation.
What page are we looking at?
That is one option and we're going to get to a
Beginning.
council
She's
or a
getting some
staff
clarification.
recommendation later on.
Okay, great. Okay. I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun. I was trying to understand where we were going, and so I understood this conversation, but because that's usually where I start is where are we trying to end up, and what's the important information to get us there. So I think I get it now, though. Thank you.
Yep. And I will say we are providing you with a lot of information and quite frankly, a lot of detailed information. But we wanted to show you some of the options that we were looking at and how the money would be moving around or could potentially move around.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, this is complicated because we're talking about a lot of different funds and needs and projects. And so appreciate council bearing with us as we walk through it. So what we're looking at on this slide is exactly what the mayor had just had a question about. So this is if the the current 05 that goes to Parks, Open Space and Trails, which is a 1/4 cent tax, was split between transportation and Parks and Rec. And so this is reflective of grants that we have for 2023. Operations, capital projects, total revenues, total expenditures, and then that fund balance. So again, this is looking at 7 years of historic data for the 2005 on average. We really would start out with that reauthorization in 2027 at about $3 million, increasing 94,000 per year thereafter, with 100% of the fund staying entirely positive. So and then this would allow for transit to increase their operations as much as the additional revenues could allow. And if there's any questions about that, Sarah could kind of speak to what that would look like. But I think we have some slides coming up on that. So turn it over to
This
Terry.
is Terry again. Just kind of go through 3 scenarios regarding the 2005 fund. This first chart really kind of reflects if we do not reauthorize the 05, and which sunsets actually in December of 2026. We have it pretty well lined out in terms of what we would be doing capital wise. That's the yellow yellow part of the chart. The gray part of the chart are those ongoing activities that I briefly discussed, such as the open space maintenance, parks maintenance, things like that. And then that orange one, we do have some grants that are mainly related to fire mitigation in 2023. Projects that we have currently scheduled for this for these funds are Smart 160 East to get us out to Three Springs, Schneider Park pickleball courts, restrooms at Schneider and Buckley Park. And then this year, we're going to be proposing in our prioritization process to renovate irrigation over at Greenmount Cemetery. And we're currently manually watering the cemetery over there. So we're going to be looking at that. And then we're also have renovations at 29th and 33rd Street river put-ins that are currently funded in this 2005. And again, that's all funded more or less. And that's what we have going until 2026. The second scenario is if we reauthorize if we reauthorize fully and Parks and Recreation keeps a quarter cent of the of a cent. And what we are talking about doing starting in 2027 is using half of those funds for CIP maintenance projects. Those would be maintenance projects on existing facilities, such as renovating the Animas River Trail or maintaining our recreation facility, which is about 21 years old. The other half could be used for new projects, new CIP projects that we have on our list. And it could be things that we move up in the timeline, or it could be a one-time project that we could potentially bond against these funds for, like Durango Mesa Park. And then the last scenario is that eighth of a cent, or splitting the money with transportation. And what we would propose, if that's the case, that we use those funds for capital improvement projects that are maintenance oriented. Like I said, taking care of the Animas River Trail or existing facilities. So those are the 3 scenarios that we would be looking at in Parks and Recreation for the 05 fund. Yes.
Okay, so this 50-50 split on the 2005 revenue and expenses chart. Okay, so when you're projecting out past like 2026 on your CIP projects, all the way out to 2030, are those the projects that are in the queue now, or are those also adding new projects?
When we look at our projects, we actually have projects queued up through 2035 in Parks and Recreation. So if we lose the funding, then we just wouldn't be able to do those projects. If we do half and half, we would really focus on our maintenance projects. But if we get the full reauthorized amount for Parks and Recreation, then we could potentially move up some projects on that timeline or tackle a large project.
Okay, that answers my question, because I was just wondering if you're adding to the workload or just projecting out for projects that we need to continue and finish.
Projects that are currently on our list, but I will have a caveat that projects come up every day.
Well, and Turi, maybe it's good to explain to the new councillors, if the whole project list would be completed, I think you have it in the numbers, you would have a need for, or negative fund balance of how much, in what order of magnitude? Because the whole project list to 2035 is not going to be completed. Yeah, it's just a fraction that we're going to complete.
Yeah, if you look at our Parks, Open Space, Trails, Recreation Master Plan, we have an enormous list of projects within there. And if you go through 2035 and you look at all the unfunded projects, we still have about $100 million of unfunded projects. But that includes large projects such as Durango Mesa Park, building a new recreation center. These are things that we would have to go through a whole community process on whether we would want or not. So just
It's
putting that out
interesting
there.
that this comes up because we've gotten a few emails over the last few days from people supporting the restructuring of the boards and commissions, mostly from like youth sports, because their voice they felt haven't been heard. And they bring up things like an indoor turf facility that's not even on our CIP list, a year-round rink with a sheet of ice that's actually regulation size, which we don't have. Like things like that aren't even on the list. Like, and so that's what's concerning a little bit to me as I'm sitting here listening, is that we're talking about taking away a little bit of funding from Parks and Rec for something we need to fund. I mean, you know, I support transit for sure, but we have so many needs that aren't being funded already in Parks and Rec. And so it's that balance of, and also maintaining what we have, because we build these shiny new projects, but we don't maintain them always. And the fact that it's 21 years old makes me feel real old, because I was here when it got built. That's awful.
Sorry for
But,
bringing that up.
Mayor,
A couple slides down into the presentation, Sarah and I will both, each of us give a description of all the projects after 2030, including those that we have unfunded right now.
Chair, may I make a suggestion? Do you believe that we're going to be able to make an educated decision or provide educated direction if we start going in that level of project detail? I mean, to me, we have a huge amount of funding requirements to do our wish list. We can barely make the anticipated projects come to fruition with the current funding. How do we effectively provide direction? as
Well, I think it's
council?
our job as counselors to kind of prioritize
Yeah.
and actually like, you know, sit down and say, no, it's important that we fund transit and it has to come from somewhere. And so we're willing to give this since Parks and Rec has been funded this amount for
Mhm.
this many years. Or no, we have so many Parks and Recs projects that are so important to us,
Mhm.
and transit often can get easier grants. We don't want to go, like, I think that at a high level, that's our job.
But so, and I completely agree, but we're going into the details of certain projects, and I think.
I think
let's
it was
go
just more
higher.
an idea. She was just asking what projects aren't being funded. I think it was just more of like a general idea of like
No,
what.
where Truly is going in the next step. I'm just seeing, you know, if we want to keep it at a high level, then we're going to have a high level discussion and not jump in too much detail. I'm just suggesting, because I think it's going to be very difficult to provide direction to get so much data in a short period.
I have a high level question. What is the opportunity for future grants around, or did you already answer this, around transit? Are we at all confident in our ability to, in some of those funding?
For transit for transit operating, the answer is not confident. We have, you know, a formula amount that's dedicated to us for our operating grant. And, you know, grants are kind of the gravy. We don't want to build a system based on that just because they are, you know, subject to fluctuation. And we want to identify more of a reliable source of dedicated funding for it. That would be my answer for transit grant specifically. That's separate from the multimodal capital grant.
Okay, and I have one more question, sorry, but I was just gonna ask, if we were to be trying to give direction to staff on this very high level discussion of potential reauthorization of 2005 and where it goes towards, it does seem like a lot of information to try to make that decision right here today with new counselors on board that I'm not sure if they're totally up to speed on all of these discussions. And they're significant discussions. I'm wondering about, there's things to consider also in that discussion, like what about if the library district does go and when that goes and what's the timeline look like? And also, I guess, so those thoughts come to my head. And then I wonder, should we and could we, or do we want to be doing any sort of community outreach and community engagement regarding these competing priorities and, uses of funds?
If I may, to kind of see if I can bring this to a little clarity and just more of that higher level portion of where we're at. When we left the retreat, this is where the higher level question really remains too, is how are we going to fund transit? Because we didn't really have an answer for that. Where we had it was at an option C, I believe, which was actually a reduction in the level of service in which we're providing today. One of the guiding principles or thoughts that came out of that retreat was, well, could we look at the 2005 sales tax and see if there was a possibility for transit and parks and recreation to share some of that funding so that transit could have the funding opportunity. So I think when you look at that big level question, or what's that big level direction is, do you even want to look into the 2005 sales tax as using that as a transit opportunity? Because that's really what is on the board, and understanding that by using that, we will lose funding to Parks and Recreation at the level of which they're getting today. Today, they're getting all of it. So the question, when we looked at it, was we could find a way to put transit in here. There will be effects of where we won't be able to fund the projects that we may have typically thought we were going to fund in Parks and Recreation. And the direction is, do you continue to want to go through this, or is it a part to where it's like, no, we want to have the 2005 sales tax completely go to parks, or, staff, let us think about it and come back and we can have that discussion again at a later time.
Just one other thought I want to add based on that. Thank you, Jose, for that clarity. That's helpful. As I think about it though, too, what we're talking about also with the potential library district ballot initiative that seems to have some support from county and city and the community from what we've learned thus far. And I know that in discussions around that is, if that were to potentially go to a ballot, that there was discussion that it would be very helpful if we knew as a city and county where the extra funds would go. And there's talk about potentially some of those extra funds maybe being able to go to housing and or transportation. So if that were the case, then that would alter this discussion.
Well, and if you look at what the options are for transit that we'll see here, like the airport, that would be a great use of joint city county, is that particular route, or because it goes out. Anyways.
Yeah, I do think that there's other opportunities and options, but I would also, caution, or at least put in front of the council, that we have a timeline that is ticking. And if the library district were to go through, there's some determination and time that needs to go through on that process. And if we look at what does that year look like in which that election goes through, and if that election does pass, then there's an option to talk about the funding for transit. But if it doesn't, we're right back to where we're at. And I do recall the thinking or the thought process that we wanted to make sure that when we came up with the plan for 2005, we had enough time that if it for any reason were to fail, we could still go back out before the tax sunset, so that we could have a second bite at the apple, if you will. And so that really is kind of what is coming through is we are at 2023. We'll close before we know it be at 2024, and 2026 comes really quick. And it's really this part from a staff proponent, especially if we want to get public engagement, that some direction and guidance will be needed sooner rather than later, specifically with the 2005, so that we can start gathering support, going out there and getting where it needs to be. And what I'm hearing is taking away from parks may be a very difficult decision, and it may not be something that the council wants to proceed with now. And they may want to say, we want to go with 2005 to just keep it at parks. And then we can start that process and see if that changes. But for this tax specifically, because of the time frame, it is something that, again, doesn't have to be today, but sooner rather than later, grabbing some guidance of what this looks like would help us be able to form something to be able to have that public engagement with.
Can I throw some real quick numbers on something real fast? How much does the quarter, how much would an 8-cent 1.5 million? How much was the council, remember when we did the reappropriation for lodgers tax and we did it to housing, and then how much was that?
About 790,000.
790,000. And then how much, we have an 11% lodgers tax council discretion. How much does that generate about?
Probably about 360,000 approximately.
I like where you're going with this. This is what, yeah.
Okay, I'm just like, I just wanted to get some quick numbers as to where we're going. I feel like Parks and Rec is a treasured gem in our community, and we talk about getting, feedback from like our region about people that are 20 aren't moving here right now, and how can we fix that? And I think, like, why did I move here when I was 19? And it is because of our Parks and Rec facility. It was because of that recreation facility that you built 21 years ago. Anyways, and so I see these emails that are coming through about indoor facilities and an ice rink, and and I just, to like pull away from it. It's for something very good though. We have to fund transit, and it's really hard to fund.
It's
I'm
not
just talking.
sexy for sure. I'm sorry, Sarah. But I think you're absolutely right. I think there's, is there a way to maybe send out a survey to see what sort of appetite the constituents of Durango have for taking an 1/8 of a cent?
We have done surveys that identify different community priorities, and transportation. I'm going to look at Devin because she is the keeper of that one, but transportation and parking did rank pretty high on that one of the top 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess I was nodding at Turi, but one of the things that, and maybe that would help with this conversation, is we had kind of a staff recommendation for a potential to take to the financial advisory board for additional analysis. Because as we were going through these numbers, it's difficult, right, to fund all of Parks and Recreation projects and be able to support transportation and all of those plans that are in place and those needs. And so I just jumped ahead in the presentation and we didn't see the transit pieces, but just to try and help a little bit with this conversation. So this would be a potential staff recommendation that could go to the financial advisory board for additional analysis and then come back to council. But what this is looking at is using that current quarter cent for the 2005 for facilities. And you can see the dollars there that it's representing. And then potentially a 1/2 cent in perpetuity. And so that would be a 1/4 cent for transportation, operation, and capital expenses. And then a 1/4 cent for Parks and Recreation for new capital and maintenance of existing capital. And then considerations for if there were to be a potential appetite to bond or do ballot language for some of the larger projects like Durango Mesa Park, recreation expansions, and some of those larger projects.
If I could give council just an idea of the number that we're talking about for transit, what we do need, because I heard where you're going with the lodgers tax. We will make service reductions in 2027 if we don't identify an additional 1.5 million on top of the 700,000 that's already dedicated to transit. So that's why we're kind of in need of larger numbers than small solutions.
You need an extra 1.5 per year in
Yes.
addition to the
Yeah,
700.
to maintain with modest expansions.
So
Yeah.
roughly need 2.25 million a year to baseline. Okay.
Yeah, and so those are in those slides. And then I just wanted to note too, since we've been kind of talking about these different pieces, that if council wanted staff to pursue these next steps, it would be taking this analysis to the Financial Advisory Board, getting community polling analysis. And to Sarah's point, when we worked with to determine on the lodgers tax, transit did rank as one of the higher priorities for the community. We did not test Parks and Recreation, but that was just trying to determine for those lodgers tax dollars. And so then, of course, there would need to be some sort of citizens working group to help with the pieces around the public engagement and those inputs. And then it would be determining some of those ballot initiatives. So I just wanted to show those slides. We have a little bit of time left if council wants to see any transportation, any of that information, but certainly to Jose's point, with the timeline here, we'll be in 2024 pretty quickly. And so with transit having kind of that cliff effect and starting in 2026, we wanted to just bring this back to council for conversation and direction.
One of the directions could be in trying to help with just hearing some of the concerns, because obviously I think one of the things we look at with the city council is you are the representation of the people. All of you were elected. And if there is consternation with you, then I can only imagine that will be drawn out to consternation within the community with having to pick between reduced park funding and transportation. So a direction could be to continue to move forward with the 2005 sales tax with parks funding completely, and then ask staff to then look at other options for transit that we could bring relatively shortly to find out ways to fund that gap if there is consternation on that. So that recommendation is flexible, because definitely don't want to, I think when we look at sales taxes or any type of tax portion that we're looking to get the public vote on, we want to make sure that we have people coming together and wanting to be part of it and say, this is a good idea. Not already having competing demands on it may not make it as successful. So there's also direction that you could do there of like, we liked kind of how it was before with the parks funding, come back and find us some different ways to fund transit and what might be possible on those opportunities.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually think that is a good idea. It's in line with what you were saying. Look at, give direction to look better into the other sources of funding, lodgers tax being one of them, and see if there's still a gap, because I think it is transit, and transportation is a key thing for our community as well.
I will jump in. On these next steps, I love taking the analysis to the FAB board. I fully support community engagement and analysis and trying, whether it's a community working group, really reaching out. Because yes, while we do try to speak for like our constituents and stuff, it's hard to have a pulse on everybody in this community. And so I think that is huge. And so those working groups that we talked about, I think this would be a great avenue for them to give their feedback on. No, we feel passionate about funding transit, or we feel passionate about keeping Parks and Rec funded to the capacity it's been. Like I said, I only hear from people that call me or email us, but I think I know, but I don't always know. And then, I would love to see some options as to, Sarah needs whatever 2.25 or what is it? How much do you need? 2.25. That was right. $2.25 million. Lodgers tax isn't going to get us there, but is it going to get us closer? And then how much are we lacking, and where can we maybe find some other options? And I'm not saying it's not out of this, because it could be, but I would like to see where, if this stayed Parks and Rec, because I think our community voted for it and likes it. And so it'd be great to get them on board with the same thing that we've had. Does that make sense? I'm rambling now. I'm going to stop.
I agree, because when we put forward that tax to do all the athletics around Durango a long time ago, it really was a boost to the community and they really enjoyed it, and it helps all the families have somewhere to take their children to play. And, you know, I enjoy the rec center too, all the trails. So I think that we should to look at, well, we can't lose the OFI tax, because once we get the tax people, the people willing to pay it, we can't lose it. So go ahead and look at authorizing that. And then I think looking for alternative funding for the transit. Maybe we can dip into the other funding cycles, you know, that, what, 2015? I don't know. I'll have to look at it, but.
That's Parks
I
and
think
Rec
that's a
too.
good-
I think there's
Good.
different options that we can look into and find out what other options might be available. So if the consensus is to keep the 2005 at the same level with parks funding as it is today, while also coming back to council within a relatively short period, within the next month or two, of just bring a presentation of, hey, here's where some of the other options we could come out with transit. Sounds good to me, if that's the will of the council.
I support that.
I was just going to add too, if I can, I support where you're going with this direction, with what I'm hearing from the counselors. And yes, bringing other ideas forward to fund transportation. I think we all recognize the importance of transit in our community, but what I've seen with Parks and Rec funding that we've had over, you know, my time on council, is that the desires and the needs, also the needs for maintenance, they are increasing a lot. The maintenance needs for our Animas River Trail, we've been focusing on that quite heavily as a council over the last couple of years. And it's more than $1 million every year just to maintain what we have, which is about a quarter of that half-cent sales tax for Parks and Rec. And so our maintenance is a lot. We're looking at Durango Mesa Park, which is a significant potential asset for our community. And I really want to see us be able to do things like complete that Animas River Trail and maintain that Animas River Trail. It's also a function of connectivity for our community, which is another mode of transportation. So I like the direction that council's going with this, and I support it.
If I can add just one piece, we actually do already have scheduled on June 20th to come back with transportation again and stormwater. So on the study session, because those were 2 items that were outstanding from the council retreat as well. So that's scheduled.
It's probably a terrible idea, but is there appetite for the half-cent renewal and then maybe another quarter-cent transportation?
That was actually the staff recommendation is,
So this is
You guys
adding,
took all my good ideas.
That's a great idea, Counselor.
You mean on top of? I'm just trying to clarify.
so the slide that's up there right now, Melissa, it's an extra quarter.
Oh, sorry, I'm talking to myself out loud here. Okay, got it. I have had received also, just so you guys know, some feedback from the community already on the 2005 half-cent sales tax renewal. And, you know, the message that I'm getting pretty consistently on it is that if half of it were to stay for Parks and Rec, that people would get behind it. And so if we're talking about taking the other half of the half-cent total thing, so a quarter cent, half to facilities and the other half to Parks and Rec, then I'm hearing people would support it. But I'm fearful that if we dilute that other half for Parks and Rec to transportation, we might lose the people who I think are going to help us with this initiative.
This is keeping what Parks and Rec is currently getting, Melissa.
Yeah.
And just adding, so it's keeping what Parks and Rec is getting. It's giving what we do for the library and Florida Road to facilities for the Civic Center and PD stuff. And then it's adding another quarter for transportation.
Okay,
so we're not diluting Parks and Rec at all.
Okay, I hear you. It's one thing to get my head around a reauthorization. It's another to add tax. It's a big deal.
Yes,
especially when we're also talking about a potential library So I mean, I don't know. I would consider it, but can we look at what potential options staff might bring forward for transportation on June 20th before we make that decision?
Yes, I agree with
Will the
Melissa.
council, yes?
Yes.
I'm not totally opposed to having the discussion, but it's an increase in taxes. And so that's a different deal than a reauth for sure.
And if I can add just a little bit of clarity as to why that is the staff recommendation, when we look at the $0.25, obviously, then, there's holes in being able to maintain the current service levels for transportation, and there's also holes being able to complete the parks and recreation projects. And so when we were looking at it from a financial standpoint, that's the about dollar figure that transportation needs to be able to have those service levels. And so that was the thought process there as to why that ended up in the recommendation.
Do you need anything else from us?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we will wrap up this study session 1 minute late, you guys. Nice work. And back here at 5:30 for the regular council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.